Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. Yes, I do still have a cold, but thank you so much for your wishes and emails that have come in and for continuing to listen. And there are much bigger problems out there than me having a sniffly nose. And as the Great Resignation continues to rock companies across multiple industries, in fact, recent surveys suggest that 41% of workers are thinking of making a move. And I think it's more important than ever to listen to employee feedback and take real action to improve on employee retention. However, mining rich, actionable insights from thousands of employee comments has always proved daunting, incredibly time-consuming, and seldom gets done. Until now, and today we have the CEO of a company called Explorance onto the podcast, who will speak in depth about the three foremost challenges facing the industry today, which are recruiting, retention, and inclusion. And we're also going to discuss how machine learning technology has proven beneficial in helping address these very issues. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to Canada, where Samir Saab is waiting to share his story and where he sees the future of the company and the industry as a whole heading. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
So thank you, Neil, for having me. I'm Samir Saab. I'm the CEO of Explorance. Explorance is a company that supports people throughout their whole journey in life, ensuring they get better through feedback, through making their voice heard, primarily focusing on the student overall experience and the employee overall experience.
Excellent. And a question I always like to begin by asking my guests is, can I ask that you share your origin story, where your passion for tech came from, and what it was that put you on this path that you find yourself on now?
I have an engineering background to start with, so I've always been fascinated by technology and how it can bridge the gaps and augment our lives in general. I've worked in a lot of technology, so I worked in telecom, I worked in aerospace, I worked in I've done a lot of endeavors along the way, but in general, there was a common theme. And many times I was being requested to do things in the name of business that were not necessarily the same as I would do in the name of life. So I've had that itch, I've had that suffering where I wanted to start my own thing. And yes, with technology, because that's what I'm fascinated with. But more importantly, to build a place where the ends don't justify the means, where however you are at home is how you are in business, and be able to prove that the model that runs in that aspect can reap success, and hopefully and possibly much more than the traditional model. And even better that we actually, I chose to venture into the listening business. So the premise really is around, if we hear people, if we truly listen what they say, if we acknowledge what they shared and made an improvement or took action on that, we engage them and they become part of the story that we're trying to tell. So it kind of brings my two aspirations together, running a business the way I'd like it to be run, which is more human, but at the same time, running it around the notion of listening and improvement, which again complements that pretty nicely.
It really does, because that path led you to Explorance, which offers experience management solutions. But for people that are hearing about you guys for the very first time, can you just tell the listeners a little bit more about what experience management consists of, and ultimately how you use technology to solve brands' problems in a digital age?
So obviously, experience management per se is becoming a broad topic. In general, it's anything that affects the journey of an employee throughout their experience within an organization. So it's connecting the touch points of their life cycle within. We specialize specifically in the measurement component. So we want to make sure that at every single touch point between an employee and their life cycle, we're able to measure their experience. So basically, let's say you want to join an organization. What did you think this organization was like? How was your recruitment process? How was your onboarding process? How engaged are you? How included do you feel? even as you exit, how was your overall experience, etc., connecting it with the learning and development piece. And the main premise behind it is, and I always compare it to a Formula One car, where you don't want to arrive to the pit stop having to wait for people to try to figure out what the problem was. You don't want to wait till you burst a tire to analyze what, why, and how it happened. The premise is to put all these sensors in an organization in advance, ensure that they're connected, ensure that every time there's a employee experience that is triggered, that a measurement activity or a survey or an evaluation that takes place. If there is feedback that is urgent and need to be attended to, it gets attended to immediately. If there is stuff that drives long-term strategy for teams or for the overall organization, it will become insights that are actionable. And obviously our goal is to automate these listening machines within organizations, and we do that with quite a few of them, to ensure that they never get caught off guard with a problem that happens after the fact. They will always get predictive or prescriptive insights so they can actually improve the overall employee experience.
Well, one of the reasons I was excited to get you on the podcast today was as this Great Resignation continued to rock companies right across industries. In fact, recent industries say that 41% of workers are thinking of making a move. And your recent survey with Wakefield Research, I think that said that 41% of employees are actively searching for a new job. I think it's more important than ever to listen to employee feedback and take real action to improve employee retention. But can you set the scene and tell me a little bit more about what you're seeing across that landscape right now?
Absolutely. I personally believe, to start with, that what COVID did is not change the landscape. It just accelerated the obvious. And the obvious was that a lot of employees were staying in certain places, either because they're comfortable or because they never got to take a step back and reassess. And a lot of organizations had taken that for granted. And this is, again, that listening piece. I'm not taking the time to tailor the way my organization functions to what my employees expect. I'm not spending enough time to actually build a story for my employees to be proud of, to be able to tell one day. I'm not helping them develop or grow. So at the heart of it, what happened is everybody got to take a step back. A lot of people moved remote, obviously. And by taking a step back, you reassess, and then you think of yourself. And then you say, hey, you know what? I deserve better. I want better. And because it moved to remote, switching a job is much less emotional, because literally you're going to end up sitting at the same desk, whether you're working for company or company B. To me, what that adds is that we have to acknowledge, because of the demand on resources and the scarcity of that, the qualified resources, it creates a shift in the landscape, I would say, from the last 50 years, from being an employer's market to becoming an employee's market. And when employers acknowledge that, they have to balance being able to manage performance, manage business acceleration and growth, but yet acknowledge the fact that we need to listen better, care more for our employees, include them more in the process of where we're going and how we're doing things, to be able to start reversing that cycle that we're seeing across the board. I would believe that even Explorance has gone through an abnormal number of resignations, and we are recognized as a top employer or number one employer in Canada, for example, and yet we struggled with it. And at the end of it, we have to acknowledge it. Some people leave because they've been resentful for a while. Some people leave because they want something else in their life, but mostly people leave because they don't feel heard.
And traditionally, of course, just mining rich, actionable insights from thousands of employee comments has always proved incredibly daunting and time-consuming for businesses. But how are you addressing this problem and trying to overcome it with technology? Can you expand on that?
Yeah, this has been, I believe, in my opinion, the most important thing is, as we start tailoring to keeping our employees happy, we can't just focus on meeting their needs. Yeah. Meeting their needs, usually, every organization has a checklist of, if we do A, B, C, D, and they tell us that we're doing well with A, B, C, D, we met the employees' needs, hence they stay. They don't stay anymore for having their needs met, because every employer out there can meet their needs. Now it's shifted to expectations. So if you look at it in general, I'm asking you 4 straight questions about the things I think you need. And then I'm giving you an open channel somewhere and say, in that area, tell me everything else that is important to you. Basically, that's your open-ended comments. For years, these comments have been neglected. And at best, HR would go through them, let's say, and if you're a company that has 70,000 employees, you could receive 150,000 comments in one engagement survey that you run. Nobody's going to read 150,000 comments. Even if you do, the amount of human bias you're going to add to them is going to be amazing. And if you end up wanting to empower your teams and every manager to get their data on the fly and the insights that come out of that critical piece of analytics, which is the employee expectation that's expressed in written comments, it's not possible. So we've worked hard for about 5 years now, and we've introduced, I think about 3 months ago, a solution that is built around employee comments. It's Blue Machine Learning, Blue ML. And basically the solution will tap automatically on any comment provided by an employee across their whole life cycle within an organization. And it's automatically able to categorize without bias and with precision. What is it the employee is referring to? How do they qualify that entity? And how do they feel about it? And what do they think should be done to improve it? This is how rich this data set is that's been ignored for years. And we feel that as employers commit further and further to listening to their employees, we have a duty to listen to what they say, not just how they answer the questions that we ask them, and to be able to get the real insights from it. And what we're discovering over time is that employees are tending to give more and more qualitative feedback, and they're also tending to make them more formative in nature. There's a lot of recommendations coming out of those. So for all those managers and those interim leaders that may not have the benefit of having consultants available at their fingertips, they will benefit a lot from at least saying, hey, you seem to have an issue in teamwork in your department, and here is what your employees are recommending you do that will make a difference.
And I think most businesses will be focusing on recruiting, retention, and especially inclusion right now. But can you expand on how machine learning tech has also proven beneficial in helping address these issues? Because it's something that everybody's talking about, but I don't think everybody would put machine learning to it or know how machine learning can make a big difference. But can you expand on that too?
Yes, absolutely. So, obviously inclusion is rising, and, the recruitment is as important, employee brand is as important. But if I look specifically at inclusion, it is part of the employee experience. And the reason being is that if we learn something from the disruption of that stemmed from COVID, is that companies needed to be very agile on the fly. And they needed overnight to empower their managers to actually do much more leading and agility in sync with corporate strategy, but not necessarily with full tie to it. Like literally that team autonomy notion has risen as the key factor for anti-fragility to be able to thrive when things go bad. And what happened is then suddenly the premise is, how do I make sure that my team is as agile as I can? It means my team needs to have diversity. But even if I put people that have different opinions or different experiences around the table, it doesn't warrant me insights from everybody. They need to feel included, because if I don't feel included, even though I may bring diversity to the table, I may not contribute the richness that I may bring to that table. And this is how inclusion became kind of a foundational part for the overall employee experience. The challenge that diversity and inclusion leaders have faced is that they come into new roles that have literally just popped over the last year or two. And there's not that there is something in the HRIS or ERP, a field that will say, hey, by the way, does this employee feel included, yes or no? Inclusion is very what's the word here? It's very intangible. It actually lives in the realm of the sentiment. And we found that the best way to be able to find inclusion indicators is to actually mine the open-ended feedback provided by an employee across their whole journey. It's not just like an inclusion survey that you run once and then you got it all. You look at the Glassdoor data, you look at the exit interviews, you look at the onboarding comments, the recruitment comments, the engagement survey comments, and all these. And you mine them, and then you're able to automatically get those insights that actually could be predictive of rising inclusion issues improvement in inclusion. But also, if I was head of inclusion, I can get the insights overnight. I don't need to run a new survey. The data is already there. It's telling that story. That's what BlueML would do. They could literally go and say, let's run it on the data we have. Let us see what are the top 5 inclusion issues at the company level. Let us share with every manager the 5 top inclusion issues they have, and let us support them in terms of knowing what is it that they could do to improve it based on what their employees recommend, based on what we would recommend, for example, or the organization would recommend. And now you created a very, very fast resolution to a challenge that I feel will not be solved easily if it's not done leveraging machine learning, leveraging what the employees have said in a very open way. And the same applies to the other items that are very specific to the connection of the experience taught and not just a silo. Even when we look at recruitment, right, there's a tendency to think that if you do a recruitment survey during the recruitment process, you figured it out. The reality is you didn't, because a lot of people are going to Glassdoor and Indeed. They're reading what is being said about you. They're making their own mind pertaining to your employer brand. They may never even apply, so you'll never even hear their voice and know what they said if we're just relying on a recruitment survey. Again, this is where machine learning, mining reputation data that could be in social website lists or Indeed, giving an image of what the employer brand is to recruitment leader and HR leaders, so they can start swaying it and changing it over time to better attract people that are a better fit for their organization.
A quick timeout from the interview to mention HireAct, the sponsors of the Tech Talks Daily podcast this month. So recruiters, are you or your business spending too long in your email and waiting for responses? Did you know that with HireAct, you can skip the headache of traditional hiring? You can view resumes, exchange contact info, and interview candidates in seconds. You can also get curated candidate recommendations that fit your job requirements. You can chat directly with your ideal candidates, accelerate your hiring process 10 times faster than those painful traditional ways. And best of all, it's a totally free download from the Apple and Google Play Store. So download HireAct from the Apple or Google Play Store, give it a try, and let me know what you think. But now, back to today's interview. And we record today's conversation in Q4 of 2021, and we're starting to look and have one eye on the future, 2022 and beyond. So where do you see the industry as a whole heading over the next few years? Because so much has changed in the last 2 years alone, but where do you see it heading beyond this?
I would like to believe that what's happening at the foundation, because of the employment market challenges and the disruptive landscape, that organizations start doing the right thing because they want to, not because they have to. I'd like to see that shift start taking place personally. I know, if we look at a lot of the public markets right now, or financial markets, they're starting to put rule on social responsibility and things like that on businesses to say, don't favor profit over community, don't favor profit over your employees. If you care, truly care. And I think that relationship of trust between an employee and an employer is going to be key for the future. And a relationship of trust can only be fostered in an open environment that is full of transparency, but that also favors true inclusion, true listening. Not inclusion because we have to do it, inclusion because we want to do it and we understand its richness. So I think that's where the bigger challenges I see that are going to face HR, inclusion, employee experience leaders in the future, in the near future, 2 to 5 years, is how do you bring that intangible component called employee and bring it as a key KPI, key component, key focus that every single other organization leader, such as the CFO and the CIO and the CEO, et cetera, are going to prioritize and understand, because it doesn't translate into profit overnight or revenue overnight. It's intangible. And that for me is learning, it's development, it's inclusion, it's overall employee experience, where we're actually looking to help people tell a better story. And in return, what they give us could be very mighty. That will be the increase in revenue, increase in profit, etc. So I think the challenge really is, again, mining the insights that are there, starting to tie these insights to tangible improvement in an organization, reaching the masses. You can't improve a company, you cannot achieve organization success anymore just by having 5 people on the top make all the decisions. We need to find a way to empower 5,000 line managers a 50,000 employee company and ensure that they are all empowered enough to act like they are the CEO of their own umbrella with core focus on their employees and the stories that they tell as well. So I think it's that paradigm shift of saying we can't lose more employees. You can't buy an employee. Everybody's throwing money at that right now. You need to buy their hearts. You need to be able to help them tell stories that matter to them so that they can help you tell the bigger story you're trying to tell with your organization. So I think it's going to play in that arena of moving from having to do it to actually convincing the key stakeholder that it is something they want to do. And there's a big advantage to do it beyond the fact that it's trendy or it's what everybody else is saying they're doing.
I completely agree with you there. And what about yourself and Explorance there? Is there anything you can share about the role that you see you guys playing in that future and what you're going to be focusing on?
For me, it's ironic because we look at the landscape today of the whole world, and I think the biggest problem is polarization. Yeah. So, when I look at 2022 and, 2023, I look at them as years of unity. And what I mean by that is, for example, we do serve half our business is higher ed, the other half is enterprise, right? So we focus student employee because at the end of it, you're not going to be a great employee if you didn't get prepared appropriately before that. And one big disconnect, for example, we noticed is that organizations and higher education institutions don't work together. So they're kind of extremely interdependent on each other, but yet they don't work together. There's no insights flowing. There's no thought leadership or think tanks happening between those two sides. Because on one side, you have higher ed where they do things because the government tells them they have to do it. And on the other side, you have the employer saying, whatever you can give me, I'll take. But now I'm going to find alternative sources to that. So the first thing is we feel we can be in a position where we can tie those two by being able to provide higher education the insights they need so they better prepare people for the workforce, and then being able to inform enterprise to be able to actually have better relationships with higher ed so they can actually start mining their talent way before the talent becomes available to the market. We see that it works very successfully in Japan, where they can book a student 2 years before they graduate and commit them to a life of employment. So that's one part of it. The second part of it is to actually focus on unifying the touch point, stop thinking in silos where recruitment leaders focus on recruitment, onboarding leaders think that if you just measure during onboarding, you got your insight, being able to say you can have very meaningful onboarding related insights that could stem out of an exit survey or a Glassdoor comment. You have to think much wider right now. People need to collaborate more. They need to understand that it's one insight. It's the employee insight across their life cycle. There's no insight that just belongs to onboarding or recruitment or learning and development, etc. And the third one for us is really to continue that process of ensuring that learning, development, inclusion, and overall employment experience are all as critical and they're all foundational parts of the overall success of an organization. So that's where we're focusing, and the underlying theme is literally unity, unifying the segments, unifying the solutions, unifying the experience touch points, supporting organization to start thinking in a way that actually helps them understand that if we all focus on the employee, if we all focus on that lifelong learner, and that encompasses the student, we're going to be able to drive much more value to our organization and their stories.
So many great points there, and loved hearing those stories, your personal story. And we've almost come full circle here. We started talking about what put you on this path that you're on today, but I'm now going to have a bit of fun with you and ask you if there's a particular song or piece of music that has accompanied you or helped you in your career, or helps you just get your head in the zone before going on stage or going in a big meeting. Is there any particular song and story you can share with us today? And I'll add that song to our Spotify playlist.
Typically it depends on the moment, right? A lot of songs could inspire me for a certain moment. There is a consistent one, but it's in French, so I don't know if you'll have it. And I can tell you the English equivalent, the second best one, which will be the English one. So it's up to you if you'd like to hear the French one or.
We'll have both. Yeah, let me have both.
Yeah. So the French one actually is it's called Mistral Gagnant. So Mistral Gagnant is Gagnant. It's from a singer called Renaud. He's like the Bob Dylan of France, as far as I go. That rugged voice, beautiful lyrics and music. And this song is almost about cherishing an instant that he had with his 5 years old daughter. And, looking at life, how fast it moves and everything. And it's just a little moment that he's describing that's just beautiful. So that's one that inspires me. And I catch myself often playing it for my children. And me and my daughter have a pact that if she gets married, while I can still dance with her, then this could be the song we'll dance for. And the English one would be My Way, just because I love doing things my way and I love everybody doing things their way to create a general sense of richness in this world.
Love both of those. I love a bit of culture and sophistication to our playlist, so I thank you for that. But before I let you go, for anyone wanting to find out more information about the work that you're doing, contact your team. What's the best way what's the best starting point for that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, obviously the website is pretty holistic. So, www.explorance.com. That would be a great place. Under LinkedIn, you can find Explorance as well. I think it is, LinkedIn/Explorance. But I would say the best bet would be through the website. And then there is a contact us form. There is a send info form. I'm happy for anybody who wants to connect directly with LinkedIn and ask any question they have. I'm usually pretty available as well. So it's an open world, but the website would probably be the best holistic source for that.
Excellent. Well, I'll add that link to the show notes so people can find you nice and easily. So much I've loved about chatting with you today, from sharing your background, your story, what led you to start Explorance 18 years ago, and where you see the future of the company and indeed the entire industry and that employment landscape heading. But more than anything, just thank you for sitting down with me and taking the time to share all that with me.
Thank you, Neil. It's been a wonderful experience. I appreciate the opportunity.
So many great talking points there, but I'd love to hear your insights and your experiences too. And as this cold is wiping me out, I'm going to go and nip off for a hot lemon and rest my podcast voice. But I do invite you all to keep your messages coming through. And remember, you can email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram @Neil C. Hughes, and I'll get straight back to you. And have no fear, the show must go on, so I will return tomorrow. But a big thank you for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.